We have 5:30. Yep. All right. Thanks everybody for coming. Let's do some quick staff introductions. I'm Matt Williams, the planner.
Scott Gilroy, Fire Chief.
Troy Rios, Police Chief.
And tonight we're just going to go over the potential effects of commercialization of cannabis, in particular the use of cannabis retail stores, and just kind of do a bit of a literature review of what's out there, what's happened in other places, look at what has happened in other local municipalities in particular as well. And then, if Scott and Troy both have anything to add on their piece, they'll have a chance to talk, and then we can take some questions. So first, this is just more broadly trends from locations that allow commercial cannabis sales and their effect on police. The consensus is generally there needs to be more long-range studies on how commercialization of cannabis affects crime in communities. A lot of the studies that are part of just the discourse now are completed over COVID, so they're either incomplete or not great data. So there's the concern, or not concern, but just the idea that there needs to be more studies done over a longer period of time. There have been a handful of recent studies that show a decline in drug-related crime, which makes sense. There's likely a decrease in black market activity when sales have been legalized, or there is no effect on crime rates overall. People who are currently doing what they're doing to acquire cannabis are continuing to do it, and then people who are interested in legally participating are going to the cannabis shops. One study from Canada did show an increase in crime rate after commercialization, but again, it seems to be an outlier and could be contributed or attributed to other societal factors. And then one area of law enforcement that does see greater pressure from legalization, not necessarily commercialization, but this study was about legalization of cannabis, which is already legal, is traffic enforcement, which is an increase in traffic-related infractions tied to marijuana use, and increases once the drug is legalized. And so kind of like alcohol, people drink and drive, and sometimes there are people who smoke and drive.
Do you have those studies? So is this your analysis, Matt?
Yes.
It might be helpful if you have a list of the studies to just include it for public access. And
Yeah.
Public safety wants to look at it.
Put that together. That list together. So Troy did reach out to other municipalities to get their feedback on places that have already commercialized and allowed the commercialization of adult use recreational cannabis stores. There's no indication that crime increases or that there's a strain of law enforcement resources. The service centers that Troy spoke to included Bangor, Newport, and Orono. According to these police departments, the key to success with adult use recreational stores is proper siting / geographic restrictions, parts of town that make sense for this type of retail store, and then additionally possibly limiting the number that are within a municipality and keeping it pretty tight.
Troy, did you, so those conversations with those departments, it was generally that they hadn't seen any.
Yeah, they hadn't seen any increase in crime. So the Bangor chief, and they actually have 9 up there, and they include all facets of it, the growing, we're just going for retail here, but they've got the whole gamut up there. And they checked with the detectives and stuff, there really hasn't been any increase to that.
Okay.
So, and like Orono, I think only has 1. And Newport only maybe they might have had 2, but they were on opposite ends of town. None of them were.
Okay, and I don't want to, are we just going for a kind of discussion here, or did you want to finish your?
No, we could open discussion more.
Yeah, well, I guess to that point you made, or that the location, that makes the most sense, I guess, I'd be interested in hearing everyone's input on that. But when I've been thinking about, okay, if this is approved by the voters, where would we allow these types of businesses? And I know, I'm sure Matt has been thinking about this as well, but in my mind, seems pretty obvious that it would be kind of not near the schools.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
but-
the law is 1,000 feet.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
state law, I mean, you could, if you read the statute, you could, if the city by ordinance wanted to decrease it to 500, you could. I don't foresee that going on anyway.
Is that from their boundary or from their building?
It's
From school property.
the problem.
Yeah, I guess that's-
Yeah, so take like the high school that extends all the way
1,000
down,
feet.
yeah, right to State Street, so.
Yeah, I mean, I would think basically between the high school and elementary school, the mill mall is
Yeah,
just
that
off,
out of town.
that in town would be off the
Yeah.
table. So now we're looking at, we're talking about our retail kind of commercial corridor. It's High Street up here and then going down one, that kind of up until, the Walmart. That corridor seems to be, and it's near the police department. It's,
Unless you that's something outside of likes or something like that. get past that.
I mean, Matt and I kind of talked about this, we'd have to sit down and talk. That would all fall into the ordinance, right? We'd have to, if it passes, right, the next step is, right, sit down and have a discussion about what we're gonna have for rules.
Right.
The
Oh, yeah,
ordinance
so-
governing it. Part of that would be location.
yeah.
And it's just, but yeah, like the general idea is that you put in commercial zoning, which is usually more high intensity retail anyway. Or like if there's a overlay zone, that includes like maybe parts of an urban or downtown area that are outside that commercial zone, that allows for flexibility, like along High Street, something like that.
Yeah, so obviously it's only a question if it passes, but.
Right.
Just, understanding if that's kind of what's been successful in other communities that are not seeing an increase in crime or issues due to the stores. Seems like it'd be a good model to replicate.
Yeah, so talking to the chief from Orono, he was kind of they're really hard set on only having one. And they were really, their location was kind of on the outskirts. But he did say that they really haven't seen any uptick.
So you say on the outskirts, that's like distance from the college.
Yeah, yeah, he didn't tell me exactly where it was. I know Bangor did send me Bangor actually sent me a map where their zones and how they have it zoned. Yeah, I think the gray part's kind of in the main city part and
Yeah, so it looks like that makes sense, basically out near the mall.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, commercial, retail, and then cultivation, that's kind of heading out of
over Hammond Street.
out of Hammond Street, yeah,
Yeah.
which makes sense, yeah, towards the airport. And testing, again, we're not even looking at those, but yeah, it's kind of these retail pockets, that's the I think that looks like the Broadway shopping center might be one. So it's similar areas and uses to High Street, really.
Yeah, and I think like Bangor's kind of morphed into, Bangor chief told me that they had a request to do mobile sales, somebody go like a van or towing a trailer to show up at the concerts and so on. The city turned that down, obviously. So, I mean, they're always looking for ways of expanding. It's just gonna be how we handle the ordinance.
I know like delivery is a piece that you can't like necessarily for caregivers in particular, that's medical, so it's separate.
Right.
It could come up later down the line, just delivery services, but we can't ban them, but we can restrict them or regulate them in a specific way, according to the state.
Thank you.
So now we move on to fire and EMS. So when this was originally scheduled, we were kind of preparing to talk about all 8 potential uses that could be voted on, but with the restriction down to just the recreational stores for adult use. There aren't really any unique challenges for fire. They operate like other retail establishments, have to follow the regular codes and regulations associated with those types of uses. That's, they'll go through normal building inspection. We could include additional requirements for adult use recreational stores, but what they would be or what good they would really do from the fire perspective, I don't, from our conversations, it didn't seem like there'd be anything of too much use.
They would still fall under the same codes that are retail.
Right.
So,
Now for just for the public's knowledge, smoking is not allowed within the retail store itself. The state of Maine prohibits smoking at public places, which include some of the following: amusement parks, ski resorts, sporting and music venues, state and national parks, campsites, playgrounds, sidewalks and roads, cannabis retail businesses, bars, restaurants, and outdoor or rooftop cafes. So even if these stores are allowed, you're only really allowed to smoke on private property with permission of the private landowner, but no places that are open to the public. And then similar to law enforcement, emergency medical services are impacted by legalization of cannabis, resulting in an increase of ER visits caused by traffic accidents linked to cannabis. However, commercialization itself, outside of legalization, has not been linked to the additional increases. And legalization is also correlated to increases in ER visits related to cannabis overuse. And kind of similar to alcohol or any other drug, if you legalize it, people are more open to use it, and they may be experimenting or dosing in ways not sure how to do it properly.
Is that information studies from Maine or is it national?
They're national studies,
National
yeah.
studies. Does Maine have much?
No,
No.
not really, not for Maine specifically.
But yeah, I guess legalization is, cannabis has been legalized for a long time now. in Maine.
I haven't seen any difference. I worked in a different state where it was not legal to use in that state.
Yeah,
And it's the same down there as it is up here, as far as our having interactions with overuse or operating under the influence. It's the same.
same as far as frequency or, okay, so, yeah,
There was no increase either way.
okay.
I do believe one of these studies was from Colorado specifically, another state that's pretty experienced with
Yeah,
legalization.
Okay.
So just a general overview of what some of the recommendations could be from the planning department and staff if the referendum passes. It'd be to create a new land use for adult recreational cannabis stores. It would be the only allowed or opted in cannabis related use. We currently have medical marijuana uses or one use on the table of uses, but it's currently not allowed anywhere in the city as a use, or the exceptions that whenever at the council meeting where 2 were grandfathered in and 1 was created through a state law, not through local law. And then, so that use would be created, so then we could create these additional requirements or regulations around it. So again, allowing this land use in the commercial and downtown zones for potential expansion to specific parts of the urban zones along High Street. Or, lower further down to State Street could be considered downtown. State requirements for site and advertising distance away from schools, hour of operations and co-location requirements would apply. As we mentioned earlier, there's about 1,000 foot. The state requires 1,000 foot buffer from schools. There are hour of operations restrictions, and then if it's, again, co-location would be if it's sharing a property with other types of businesses. There are certain businesses that cannabis uses cannot share a structure with. So other considerations the city could take would be additional limits on the hours of operations. We can increase the size of the school buffer zone. And then also, I don't know if we can reduce it. You said we could reduce it.
Well, I was reading the law, and yeah, it could be reduced. Like I said, I don't know if anybody does that.
Right. And then capping the number of establishments, which I'm pretty sure is a goal of the council already, keeping it at 1 or 2 facilities within the city. So those are general recommendations that could potentially move forward. So the next workshop is September 12th. We'll cover the previous slide in a little bit more detail because the topic of the next workshop is specifically land use, code enforcement, and zoning. So there'll be a lot more information on that piece there. We'll discuss the pros and cons of siting in certain zones and locations. The potential for possible additional requirements for licensing. The city will be potentially creating a specific license for this use, especially if there are only 1 or 2. And I'll have to go through council for approval, similar to how alcohol has to. And so what that could look like. And then capping the total number of adult recreational use stores in the city and how, that decision could be made or what could inform that decision. So that was it for slides. We're happy to take questions or comments.
I have a question for both chiefs. Have you had any input or sought any input from how things have been going? Any problems or whatever's happening in Southwest Harbor with their commercial use?
I have not had contact with Southwest Harbor.
No, I haven't even heard any.
Are there any others in Hancock County?
Surrey,
I don't think Surrey passed
but
actually.
didn't pass it. I think as far as that I'm aware of for recreation, adult use or recreation, it's just Southwest
Southwest Harbor.
Harbor. There are, for
That's what it was.
medical, there are a number of towns, on your way down 1A, you see them all, and obviously Trenton and Dedham. I believe Franklin has adult use cannabis stores as well. So there are a few municipalities in Hancock County that have it. And then once you get up to Brewer and Bangor, there are a number of businesses there too.
I mean, I think the general consensus are, everybody that I've talked to, really been no increase in criminal activity due to marijuana use. Most of them have, the increase they have is maybe an alarm there. Just doing the call for any business.
And there's no increase for information, any of you or Matt on EMS, effect on EMS, not regular police and fire calls, but
Well,
Medical service.
I also serve in the
Yeah, I know.
EMS. No, we have none. We have none. And like I was explaining earlier, I worked for 20 years in another state and there was no change down there either. And it was illegal down there. And we still didn't, there was no fluctuation. So coming from one state to another, there was no difference in our interactions.
I guess, how frequently are you dealing with people that have had problems related to cannabis?
Very, very few, very few.
What about for traffic stops? Is that the number one kind of interaction you guys have with them?
Yeah, but honestly, these days, it's very rarely to find somebody with just cannabis on board as heroin and fentanyl.
It's usually, if it's involved, it's involved with
Multi-drug use.
multi-drug use. Okay. So you're not dealing frequently with just people on cannabis.
No,
You seen any impacts on like children? Like I know there's been concerns raised about, the edibles can look like children's candy or whatever.
I've been here 3 years and I think there's only been one occurrence that I can recall where a child had gotten a hold of it.
Okay.
That's all I can think of in the past 3 years.
I think that's something we can deal with on the ordinance part. We can not allow edibles.
You could,
Yeah, and I think the state recently though has, the edibles, as I understand it, their regulation includes they can't be made to look like children's, like candy, like I guess before in some states, you could buy an edible that looks just like a Skittle.
Yeah.
Obviously that would cause, whereas now I believe the edibles, they're labeled, the packaging's labeled with, contains THC. There's a whole host of labeling requirements on them, but that doesn't mean a kid can't get their hands on them. But, yeah, I just was interested if we had seen anyone, any kind of.
It's the only one incident that I can recall in the past 3 years.
I guess questions I have from this council's perspective is, does public safety have, in your, you guys are the chiefs, do you or your departments, is there a general thought on whether or not this would cause further issues in public safety? Or, it sounds like what you've heard from talking to people is no, but what about you guys, I guess? generally or department speaking?
Me personally, I don't think we're gonna see, what we have now, I think is what's gonna be, what we're dealing with now, which is very little. Of the facility, sites that we have here, we have very few problems.
With the existing cannabis
Yeah.
businesses?
So I don't see any problems from fire and EMS perspective that it's going to cause any problems on our stuff.
Okay.
Or
Yeah.
increase our calls.
I mean, for us, I don't see it either. I mean, it's pretty regulated. I mean, you only go in there and buy, I think, 2.5 ounces is the max you can go in and buy. Some can go in there and buy, pound at a time. So, I mean, I don't think we can pretty stuff with it.
Do we have issues with consumption in public? Like, is there, you never know, we driving down the road and I know it's not a skunk that I'm smelling, but is there like, I haven't, you go down to Portland and there's people walking down the street in Portland just openly using it. I haven't seen that here, other than occasionally smelling it, but I don't know if that's an issue the department's dealing with at all.
No, we don't have any complaints about people using it. I mean, the law, like Matt went over with where you can use it, I mean, it's a certified $100 fine if you smoked it in public, obviously we would try to hold people to that if we can pass it, for sure.
Mhm.
I mean, for as long as marijuana's been legal on the personal use, I don't think establishing retail stores in Ellsworth, you're gonna see a big increase in the use. Somebody who's growing their own may end up going to the store and buy it. So I don't think you're gonna all of a sudden see just people coming out of the woodworks and the percentage of people in Ellsworth using marijuana is gonna double if you have a retail store.
Yeah, like I said, it's been in Maine legalized for a long time now, especially compared to other states. So as far as use goes, it seems like, yeah, it would make sense. You can get cannabis pretty easily in Ellsworth or outside of Ellsworth. It's not as if it's, we're opening the floodgates to allow cannabis into this community. It's already here. So that's for me personally why I think it makes a lot of sense if it's already here, having these businesses well regulated in a good, that public safety feels good about, and then it's just might as well have it above the board, right? Have it legalized, have these businesses know where these businesses are, and then it's a form of tax revenue for the city, and it's business generating, and they're filling up commercial space that may be empty. If it's already here, and we're not seeing, obviously if we did see these increases, the city has the authority to say, all right, this isn't working. But it sounds like that we're not anticipating that. Public safety is not anticipating that. So it would make sense in that regard. If citizens vote to approve it in November, then we can, as Matt's laying out, there's a way to do this thoughtfully, avoiding schools, avoiding, churches, keeping it in a commercial area.
Not overrun the city with them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Limit the number of them, certainly. And we already have a medical dispensary and 2 medical stores, so 2 caregiver stores. So, if, say we had 3 adult use businesses, and they're in those locations, it doesn't seem like that. So I don't know. I just picked that up the year.
And is the referendum gonna be, the vote, gonna be advisory, or is it gonna be?
No, this will
Pass, yes, or
be,
no?
so technically, the city council doesn't need to do this. We could vote as a council.
Right.
But no, it wouldn't be advisory. It would be a official legislative, because in essence, we're saying, rather than us as council being the legislative body, people of Ellsworth, we're giving you that authority here. It's popular referendum.
Yeah.
And if they say yes, then that is the opt-in vote. That's how I think the state law would interpret that. But then, it doesn't mean anyone could just run to the city then say, okay, well, I want to open one up, next to the school. We'd say, okay, then the next step is, getting the ordinance in place. Planning board would be the first review.
Yeah.
You guys would, vet it and then make a recommendation to us as the council, and we'd have our own review and public meetings and public notices. And, as much public input as possible. And then whatever we just, if setting where, how many, what kind of getting feedback from public safety. So but it's a long way of answering your question. Yeah, and I think the way that, if it's a no, then I think that's a pretty strong signal to the council that this is not what people want. And I think we'd all be pretty hesitant to then go, well, we're gonna do this anyways. But, I think it will be interesting to see what the outcome is, and if it's a yes, is it a narrow yes, or is it a big majority? And, that it will be helpful for the council and the city to know where our community stands, so. But beyond that, then the idea is if the council's, can then, if it does pass, then I think the council can look at that and say, okay, let's do this recreational business, the retail business locations. And do we also want to consider, okay, does that mean we should also permit cultivation centers or businesses or testing facilities or manufacturing, where they take the product and turn it into other stuff? I don't know if, that's a question for another day, but.
You get a strong opposition from me on that one.
Yeah, because the chemicals and the
Yeah.
I
process.
mean, I think one of the reasons the council just selected this one question instead of doing multiple uses was because of the timeline. There wasn't the proper time to do education on all those more complex uses. So if there's a yes for this, you get through the recreational stores, put that into place, then you can actually do a long-term public engagement campaign for the other uses and educational.
Yeah, and if we're providing good reason why that certain businesses are not a good idea. That's good, but yeah, exactly. Seems to be the most, I think the businesses are the most public facing, or the ones people are most familiar with, so it seemed like it was a good thought to just focus on this and see what the public says.
I have had one question, which doesn't really pertain to this specific title of this meeting today, but I have always had this interest in the back of my head and wondering just who is out there in the community, business community, cannabis community, other community here that is really pushing this thing. Historically, back the council under the previous state statute, they didn't do anything, and we ended up getting some of the thing, a couple of the medical uses that we have at the current time, which there doesn't appear to be any problem with it. And then we went and the state changed the law, so we opted in and we have the one cure relief under that statute. And we have a zoning ordinance provision, land use ordinance provision that provides, I think, for that. And then there wasn't much that went on. And then a year or two ago, I think before anyone who was on this council, a council had something come before the council and they just didn't do anything. It was a sort of amorphous, it was an agenda item, which there've been several ones that sort of amorphous, they don't say anything. Council talks, and this time they didn't do anything that time. Then nothing materialized in my recollection until sometime this winter, I think. Councilor Stein put on another amorphous agenda item, and there was some discussion, and then there was some talk maybe about the council or planning board or some other, or the city generally having some kind of workshops or something, and then nothing happened. And then at the July meeting, Councilor Stein puts on this semi-amorphous thing, but actually I didn't read it as sort of if you voted to do something, that it was sort of inferring that something would be done and it was a positive statement, but that's, I guess, what the council sort of did, and the vote was taken at the July meeting that then put us forward to the vote that was ultimately taken at this August meeting, which, and the thing that I just have in the background is who's out there other than Councilor Stein? Who's out there? I've heard some rumors that who's pushing these things, and I've heard rumors that they'd also be pushing the further expansion of it if the vote went, but who's out there pushing this in the first place?
I do know there are community members who are interested in seeing move it forward, from what I've heard as a staff member. But in terms of, putting on council agendas and stuff, I don't know if anyone in particular really is pushing it, from what I know.
I've been approached by a few people, saying that they think it's, that they'd like to see this, cannabis legalized. And I think part of what you're describing is, in my practice as an attorney, I represent, work with a number of municipalities. And you're seeing this, it's not just Ellsworth. I think the longer, as more communities in Maine are opting in and allowing these businesses, I think more people are seeing them, right? And then I can't, it's a generalization, but I think people are starting to see, okay, these are in these communities and they haven't, reefer madness hasn't taken over, right? It seems like it's, we're hearing as, cities or communities between Bangor and Orono and Newport, and I think Ellsworth's pretty similar to Orono's population, aside from the university. And you're seeing that people are kind of getting used to these businesses and seeing that they're not causing problems. So I think there's, I look at it as a business opportunity for the municipality, for Ellsworth. And I think others are seeing that. So I think there's just more people saying, well, why don't we have this in Ellsworth? Considering how, anyone going to Acadia or down east comes through here, on your way to Acadia, now there's like, well, why wouldn't we have these businesses and people can go do their grocery shopping, go to, Global Beverage and then hit the cannabis store and, you've got everything you need for your vacation if you use cannabis. I guess it's kind of the sense. So that's my perspective, but I think it's just generally people are getting more, comfortable with the idea. They're seeing it in more places. And then it's like, well, why don't we have that in Ellsworth? The medical businesses have been here for a while, but you have to be, as I understand it, you have to go get a medical card to go to these establishments. And that precludes pretty much anyone from out of state. So now the adult use, the recreational allows anyone that's of age, and has a valid ID that could be coming up from, wherever out of state, and then they can, purchase cannabis without having, whereas the medical systems more regulated.
I think over the years, Ray, I think people have approached the planning office inquiring if it's legal to establish a store in Ellsworth. And since the law was changed, allowing towns to opt in, Ellsworth hasn't done anything up until this point. And so whoever may have come and inquired, yes and no, we don't allow it, and just to take it upon themselves to pursue that.
Yeah, and I guess to that point, Councilor Stein is certainly, he's the one that supported it to put it on the agenda, but I also think he was first, when I talked to him, he was very much, this should be put to the people to decide, not, and I think everyone on the count, that's why it passed unanimously last night. We were down 2 counselors, but 5-0 votes said, yeah, let's advance this, because ultimately it seems like now's the time. There's enough interest that let's see if the community wants it. And if they don't, then there we go, and then we can move on to other things. But
And there was a not too distant council that this idea was brought to them and they just flat asked, no, we're not discussing it. We wouldn't even have a discussion about it. Just nope. Absolutely.
I mean, I think you can attribute John being the voice of it just from his profession and his business. I mean, he owns a brewery where he's probably getting more input from people than Pat would have coming into a lawyer's office talking about it. So, I think John's probably in the middle of the crowd that's more for it.
People are recreating there in a certain way, they might be talking to him about possibly recreating another.
yeah, and then John's business is very much also geared towards, our tourist economy. And, folks are coming from all over the country, and Fogtown's got a really good reputation, and so, people go there and they're like, oh, isn't cannabis, marijuana legal in Maine? Where can I get that?
Right.
So I think that's,
Probably a lot easier and more.
I bet he is.
Comments, questions? All right, well, the next workshop is September 12th. That'll focus on the zoning, land use, and code enforcement options that will be available. So like as we go through the writing of the ordinance, things we'll be looking at, and potential, what we're hearing from council and from the community, what they'd be interested in, again, like a slower rollout, capping the number of stores, limiting where they're citing, and going through what that might look like in an actual ordinance form. So.
And thank you, Chief Gilroy and Chief Beers. I think it's great that you guys have reached out to those folks. If possible, I like the suggestion of checking in with Southwest Harbor, because they are the only, as far as we know, adult use allowing business in Hancock County. They're similar in that, I'm sure a lot of their clientele are folks on vacation. One of those, that community's seen any issues.
Yeah, I can definitely check with him. Be confident I'm gonna get the same answer.
Yeah, but it'd be great to then kind of say, okay, it's not just Penobscot County,
Right.
it's also folks not too far from here.
Just hire someone who used to work there.
Yes. Yep.
You did.
Nobody's recreating it.
Right.
Well, thanks everybody for coming, and see you 12.
That makes sense.